Okay, so today we're going to do part 2 of the statistical analysis of archetypes from 2025. If you haven't watched part 1, if you didn't watch yesterday's video, go and watch it. I don't suggest it. I demand it. Not because I want the view, just because you won't understand what's going on in this video, because I'm not going to explain it like I did yesterday. But today we're going to take a look at the other maps that I didn't talk about yesterday, and then the overall data, which is quite interesting as well. So let's start off with Lotus here, and on Lotus, bit of a different theme to some of the things that I talked about yesterday. In yesterday's video, we mentioned that for quite a few of the maps, generally the most picked archetypes tended to not do so well. That's kind of the inverse here on Lotus, where Double Senti wasn't picked a ton, didn't do well. Double Initiator wasn't picked a ton, didn't do well. The ones that did get picked more tended to do better. So I do think that Yoru and Viper kind of, the dominant agents on this map, and perhaps these comps, the Double Senti and Double Initiator comps, struggled because they tended to play neither Viper nor Yoru, and that is a mistake. Basically, there are 3 good options here. Double Smoke Senti is kind of the old Fnatic stuff. No Senti Double Smoke is a lot of what G2 were doing, and Double Duelist, obviously, you could say a lot of teams were playing Double Duelist, but let's say Paper Rex, right? And all 3 of those, were decent options to go with. Now, in terms of the win rates individually between the matchups, there are some interesting things here, like the old Fnatic meta, Double Smoke Senti stuff, did beat out Double Duelist, a fair few times. So that actually does seem like a slightly favored matchup here for kind of the old school Double Smoke Senti, which doesn't really have any big weaknesses. I mean, I've said this a lot in the past, but it seems like Fnatic in 2023, they just kind of did figure out the map, right? Because it does have a slightly losing record against Double Initiator, interestingly enough, but not by a lot. And Double Initiator in general, if you come up against anything else, like Double Duelist, for instance, you're in a lot of trouble. So that's not a great way to approach the map anyway. It had a slight winning record against the no-smoke Double Senti stuff. It had 4 and 4 against Double Senti, and then it beat Double Duelist. So it just seems like just a fundamentally solid way of approaching the map that doesn't really have any major weaknesses, but one of the big ones was Double Duelist did destroy Double Initiator, as did the no Sentinel Double Smokes kind of as well. Moving on to Pearl. In terms of pick rates here, you got heavy Double Initiator, some Double Duelist, some Double Senti, and a tiny bit of Double Controller. But again, we're in kind of the general theme of whatever the most played is, actually isn't that great and isn't the best option on the map, right? You got a lot of Double Initiator on Pearl this year, and it didn't do as well, right? But neither did Double Duelist. We've seen Double Duelist be successful, as we did on Lotus there, on quite a few of the other maps as well, but there are a few maps like Abyss and like Pearl where actually its win rate was actually pretty bad. Double Duelist, whilst, especially with the new patch, I'm expecting, we'll see quite a bit of Double Duelist in general. It does seem like there are certain maps where it just isn't as good, right? And what's interesting about Pearl and going forward with Pearl, now that it's back in the map pool, is the Double Senti, which generally, was like okay on some maps, but not great. This is the map where actually it had a good pick rate, and it was clearly the best option of the main 3 ways of playing the map. Double Controller obviously did well, but this is a pretty small sample size. What's interesting about this is, I was thinking about Double Senti, and it starts to make sense, right? Because, like, Deadlock is a decent pick on this map. Vice is, or at least was a good pick on this map. We'll see. Killjoy is still pretty good. Cypher is decent. Chamber is good. Vito will probably be good. Sage now seems like might be a decent option on Pearl. Like, all of the Sentinels do seem like a fairly decent option on this map. So you might see that isn't that big of a surprise. The Double Senti actually did okay. But obviously with some of the Sentinel nerfs, it'll be interesting to see if we get maybe a bit more Double Controller. I would be interested in seeing, if we did get a bit more Double Controller, how does this actually do with a bit of a bigger sample size? So we'll have to see, but Double Senti this year, at least in the past, was basically the best way of playing the map. And that kind of bears out as well with some of the head-to-heads as well, because you'll see here that Double Initiator actually did well against Double Duelist, right? So of those 2, it does seem like Double Initiator, won the head-to-head. But if you want to beat it, it's very simple. You just play Double Sentinel or you play Double Controller. I mean, Double Sentinel, as we showed, just seems like the best way, or at least it was the best way of approaching the map. Maybe this is a map where you do lean more Double Senti, or maybe try some Double Controller, because it seems like Double Duelist, this just isn't maybe the best map for it. Moving on to Split, and on Split, historically, there has been a lot of different ways of approaching this map, more so than perhaps others in the past, and that kind of still bears out now as well, where you do have some of the kind of what I'll call the old Sentinels meta, Sentinels Masters Madrid when they were good at Split, right? The kind of like solo Initiator stuff with Double Controller and a Sentinel. We did get a lot of this year, the Double Initiator with a Viper, right? So no Sentinel, Double Initiator, Double Smokes. you did get some double Initiator Sentinel, you got some double Senti, and you got a fair amount of double Duelist as well. And looking at this, you can see that actually kind of the double Duelist of the main ways of playing the map, the double Duelist was very successful, and the double Initiator Viper stuff wasn't nearly as successful, right? It very much seems like going double Duelist, or even here with the double Initiator with a Sentinel as well, did fairly well with a smaller sample size. But yeah, double Duelist, I would expect, you know, given what the patch has done as well, you know, I would expect almost to see more double Initiator Viper, more double Duelist. These actually might go up even more in terms of the pick rate with the most recent patch we got. But I think double Duelist, it seems like, just is the better way of approaching the map, or at least it certainly was this past year. Now, looking at the individual matchups, you can see here that of the two most played archetypes, right, the double Duelist versus the double Initiator Viper, the DIV, double Duelist heavily in favor, right? 12-5 of our two most played kind of shows, kind of tells you the story, to be honest. And then also dominating others like the double Smoke Senti as well. So very, very interesting there. If you were going to counter the double Duelist, at least this year, double Initiator with a Sentinel, you know, not playing a Viper, did seem like the best way. And not a massive sample size here whatsoever, but if we are going to go to a lot more double Duelist, maybe that is the way that you want to go towards it. And double Senti did go 3-2 against it as well, so maybe there's something there, but again, a small sample size. But it does look like double Duelist is the way to kind of approach the map right now. And then finally on to Sunset, and again here we see kind of that familiar theme. Whatever the most picked thing is, you know, doesn't do that well, right? With the double Initiator here on Sunset. Double Senti not played a lot, but did all right. Well, did pretty well, but it's a small sample size. Double Smokes, we did see quite a bit more double Smokes, particularly towards the end of the season, and it did pretty good. And then double Duelist, you know, did okay as well with a fairly hefty pick right there. So, and taking a look here at kind of the individual matchups as well, that kind of is bearing out where, again, double Smokes is having like a decent, you know, matchup against either, and double Duelist is, but you know, the better choice against the double Initiator. But again, with the patch that we got, I'm expecting less double Initiator across the board in general. But now let's come to the overall data. So what this is I took the 5 most played archetypes across the entire, you know, season, which is this: the double Initiator, double Senti, double Smokes, no Senti with the double Smokes, and double Duelist, right? So these were the 5 most played archetypes across all of the maps, and I basically eliminated everything else, right? Eliminated the stuff that was kind of very niche and whatever, and just looked at these 5, right? And what I came to was this, right? You see that overall, across all the maps, double Initiator still was the most picked archetype, you know, overall this year in 2025. You then had double Smokes coming in next, then double Duelist at just under 20%, then no Senti double Smokes, and then double Senti. But if you take a look at the win rates, most of them are doing okay, aside from double Initiator. Double Initiator did not do very well, right? Of them, double Smokes was the most successful, and this was, and I had these numbers, of course, when I was looking at the most recent patch, and this was one of my big concerns with this patch, is that if anything, this got probably quite a bit worse going double Initiator. Double Senti probably got a bit worse as well, and probably double Smokes and double Duelist got a bit better, right? Which, when you look at these numbers, does that make sense, right? Does that make sense? I would argue absolutely not. And that was one of my main concerns with this patch that we got in 11.08, was that it doesn't actually reflect what is going on in the game, right? Because Initiators are struggling, and playing 2 Initiators seems like it's not a good idea at the pro level. Double Senti, whilst it actually is doing okay when it's played, you know, isn't played a ton in general. And a lot of this will be like Icebox and stuff and playing like Sage. So, you know, like on a lot of maps, you know, it isn't get played at all, and you nerfed a lot of the Sentinels pretty hard, but we didn't nerf Viper in particular maybe enough. You know, Yoru is still going to be picked quite a lot, I think, and, you know, it's going to be pretty good. So yeah, I just think that this kind of tells a story of double Initiator. The Initiators all got nerfed, you know, quite heavily, and arguably you couldn't have picked a worse time to do that, because this is probably their worst win rate, I would guess, of the game's history. Actually, it's probably their lowest pick rate as well in the game's history, because, you know, double Initiator has been the main way of playing this game for most of its history. But now let's take a look at the individual matchup table as well. So I'm not going to talk too much about this individual table. I'm just going to leave it on the screen that you can kind of pause, take a look at it. Again, the way to read this is basically treat this as like a mirror, right? So if you want double Initiator versus double Duelist, the wins are here. So this was 60 wins for Initiator versus Duelist, but double Duelist beat double Initiator 74 times, for instance. So you can read the table here if you want and just pause it and just take a look at every matchup. But now I'm going to take you to this page, which is the individual matchups for each one against the others. And this is where it gets quite interesting to kind of theorize about the game and talk about the game and understand the game and like what beats what, because there are some interesting things in here, right? Let's start with double Initiator, which again, as you can see, just didn't do very well. It just isn't a good way of playing the game in 2025, right? And now with the nerfs, it's probably even worse. So if I was a team looking at this, I would say, on most, if not all maps, I don't want to be playing, you know, a standard double Initiator with a Sentinel comp. When we take a look at double Senti though, here is where it gets quite interesting to me, because it has some very warped matchups, right? Against double Initiator, it's dominant. It absolutely destroys them. Against double Smokes as well, it also is very good. But against no Smokes, with no Sentinel double Smokes, it struggles, although this isn't a massive sample size, it must be said. This is like the 2 least played archetypes, so there wasn't a ton of games here. It's actually only 9 to 6, so there's not a ton of games there, so you know, take this one with a bit of a grain of salt. But against double Duelist, it also struggles, right? And when you start to theorize about double Sentinel and like what that means, there's a general thing from like Magic the Gathering that is kind of stuck in my head, which is in Magic the Gathering, the best way of playing is generally to go a little bit slower than your opponent or much faster. And I feel like that is playing out here as well, right? Where double Senti is going to play a little bit slower than double Initiator and double Smokes, but double Duelist plays a lot faster than it, right? And I feel like that is what is being said here for this double Senti numbers. Because you can imagine a world where like double Initiator and double Smokes, right? The double Senti just has enough util, they maybe struggle to break it, they struggle to get in onto sites, you know, they end up losing, they can't quite figure it out. Whereas double Duelist can maybe, you know, just batter through, right? It can get through that and manage to, you know, just kind of take them off guard. And then when double Duelist is on the defense side, it can be super aggro, and double Senti doesn't quite have, you know, the util to maybe clear them out of all those positions and whatever, right? And they struggle with it. And that I think does make sense. And then if we take a look at double Smokes as well and their win rates, we also see kind of an interesting pattern, right? And again, when we're theorizing about where the game is going to go, I think in general, we're going to see less double Initiator. We're probably going to see more double Duelist. We're probably going to see more double Smokes. Well, in that crucial matchup of double Duelist versus double Smokes, you see that double Smokes is actually coming out on top, right? So the double Duelist, and actually, let's just quickly talk about their win rates as well down here at the bottom, because you see the double Duelist did pretty well against everything apart from double Smokes, right? And what I really want to talk about with these kind of 3 archetypes down at the bottom is where we go in the future, right? Because I do think the future is in these 3, right? The future is in double Smokes, it's in a no Senti double Smokes, and it's in double Duelist. And if we think about that as kind of a matchup, well, double Smokes beats double Duelist. So if you're playing against a double Duelist comp, you might want to play double Smokes with a Senti. Playing no Sentinel with double Smokes, well, double Duelist actually beats that quite a lot. So you want that Sentinel in here, right? Like without that Sentinel, and again, to me, theory-wise, this makes sense, right? If you're a double Duelist team playing against double Smokes, you try and maybe get in that site, you run into some Sentinel utility, they then just put up a bunch of Smokes, you can't get in, you struggle a little bit, and then on defense side, they're just walking around the map everywhere, and you don't have enough information maybe to deal with that, right? And they just contacting up on you, you're getting caught out, you know, you're struggling, basically. But against a team that's not playing that Sentinel, maybe they don't have enough stall, right? Maybe they don't quite have enough stall. They don't have maybe flank watch as well, as you're trying to be aggressive on the defensive side. And so there are some things that they might struggle with there. So looking forward then, what does this all mean? Well, to me, what this means is that you're probably going to get a decent amount of double Duelist. But if you're a team that thinks you can run double Smokes against that, it seems like that is at least a favorable matchup overall, right? So how do you deal with double Smokes then? Like, what's the best way of doing it? Well, one way is potentially dropping your Sentinel and playing, you know, a double Smokes, double Initiator comp. But the other way is maybe you go double Senti, right? Maybe that is the answer to Viper right now. Like, if Viper does become super duper strong and it starts to see play everywhere, maybe if you can find some kind of double senti comp that you like, maybe that is a decent counter to the double smokes. It's kind of creating that triangle. Double Initiator has kind of been banished to, you know, the wilderness. Don't play that. But of double duelist, double smokes, double senti, maybe there is a bit of a kind of triangle forming of what is good versus what.